The streets of Lagos hummed with life as Mrs. Folake Ademola watched the sunsets from her balcony in Ikoyi, her hands resting on the marble rail. From up there, everything seemed perfect. The sprawling city, the twinkling light of luxury cars, and the distant echoes of honking and chatter. Her husband, Yinka, was one of Lagos' most respected businessmen, and her children, Toby and Shade, were the embodiment of privilege. Yet, beneath this picture-perfect life, a secret was eaten away at the foundation of the Ademolas. In the kitchen below, Aisha, their young house help, was quietly preparing dinner, her back hunched over as she worked. Aisha had come to them 2 years earlier, a timid girl from a village in the north. She had been sent to Lagos to work for the Ademolas by a distant relative. And Folake, like many wealthy Lagosians, treated her as an afterthought. Aisha was quiet, dutiful, and never complained. These were traits Folake found convenient. But it was this very silence that allowed Toby, Folake's son, to take advantage of her vulnerability. At first, it was small things, brushing against her when no one was looking, a lingering touch, a whispered threat. Soon, it escalated, and Aisha found herself trapped in the horrifying reality of Toby's abuse. She tried to push him away, but who would listen to her? A mere house help. Recently, Folake had noticed a shift in the girl. She moved slower, avoided eye contacts, and seemed to live in the shadow of their home. Deep down, Folake knew something was wrong. She had seen the looks her son Toby threw at Aisha. She had heard the soft cries at night, and she had seen the way Aisha shrank when Toby walked into a room. Still, Folake told herself it wasn't her problem. Toby was her pride and joy, the heir to the family's legacy. He was destined for greatness, she thought, so she turned a blind eye. It was easier that way, but when Aisha's belly began to swell, the truth became impossible to ignore. The girl was pregnant. Folake's heart pounded in her chest. The day she confronted Aisha, she couldn't ask outright. Her family's reputation was at stake. Instead, she cornered the girl into the kitchen. "How far are you gone?" Folake asked, her voice cold. Aisha's lips trembled as she struggled to speak. "4 months, ma." "Whose child is it?" Folake demanded, though she already knew the answer. Aisha's silence was all she needed. Folake's mind raced. What would people say if they find out her son, her perfect Toby, involved with the help? No, she couldn't allow it. Something had to be done, and quickly. That night, she sat beside Yinka in their bedroom, her voice steady as she told him about the pregnancy. Together, they agreed that Aisha had to go. The next morning, Folake handed Aisha a small bag of clothes and a few naira bills. The girl stood by the gate, her eyes beaming with unshed tears. Her belly ran with life. "Go back to your people," Folake said, her voice clipped. There is nothing for you here. But madam, Aisha began, her voice weak. Where will I go? I don't have anyone in Lagos. Folake's heart tightened, but she refused to let guilt seep in. You should have thought about that before, she said, turning her back on the girl she had once called family. You are no longer our responsibility. With that, Aisha was gone, swallowed by the chaos of Lagos' busy streets. Folake tried to forget. She buried herself in charity events, shopping sprees, and dining with wives of Lagos elites. Toby was sent to abroad to study, and life returned to its pristine order. But in a quiet moment, when the house was still, the memory of Aisha lingered. Her pleading eyes, the swell of her belly, the knowledge that Folake had done nothing. 6 years later, Folake found herself in the stray halls of Lagos Hospital, waiting for her annual checkup. As she sat in the waiting room, flipping through an old magazine, she overheard two nurses chatting behind the counter. This woman looks familiar. Do you remember the case from years ago? One of the nurses whispered. The one where they swapped the babies at birth by mistake. Folake's ears pricked up. Ah, yes, the other nurse replied. It was such a mess. They realized the mix-up years later, but by then, it was too late. The children had already grown up with different families. Folake's heart began to race. She felt a strange sensation deep in her stomach, an odd fear crawling its way back to the surface. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, unable to sleep, Folake searched through old hospital records. It wasn't easy, but eventually, she found what she was looking for. The truth. After so many travels and researches, she found out that Aisha wasn't some girl sent from the village to serve her family. She was Folake's real daughter. The day Aisha and Shade were born, there had been a mistake, a tragic, irreversible mistake. The hospital had switched the babies, sending Folake's real child away with another mother. For years, Folake had raised someone else's daughter, while her own flesh and blood had been cast out like trash. Folake's world shattered in an instant. The girl she had ignored, abandoned, and thrown away had been her daughter all along. And worst, her son, her Toby, had violated his own sister. The next morning, Folake found herself in the part of Lagos she had never ventured to before. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and desperation. The streets lined with crumbling buildings. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached a small tailoring shop. The name Aisha was written on a wooden sign above the door. Inside, Aisha sat at the sewing machine, her hands working steadily as a young boy played at her feet. Folake froze when she saw him. His features were unmistakably Toby's. Aisha, Folake whispered, her voice barely audible. Aisha looked up, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing here? She asked, her tone sharp. I came to apologize, Folake stammered. I found out the truth. Aisha's eyes darkened. The truth. And what good does that do me now? I don't know, Folake said, her voice trembling. I don't know you were my daughter. I didn't know what they did. Please, Aisha, come home. Let me make it right. Aisha stood, her hands clenched at her sides. You threw me away, she spat, her voice thick with emotion. You let him do that to me. And then you cast me out like I was nothing. Tears streamed down Folake's face. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, Aisha, let me fix this. But Aisha shook her head. Her expression hardened by years of pain. You can't fix what's already broken, she said, her voice icy. Go back to your perfect life, madam. I don't need you. Folake's heart shattered as Aisha turned away, her son clinging to her side. She had lost her daughter, not once, but twice. As she walked back through the crowded streets of Lagos, the weight of her guilt pressed down on her. The city's noise swayed around her, indifferent to her grief. For years, she had hidden behind the walls of privilege, ignoring the damage she had caused. But Lagos remembered, and so did she. Morals of the story. The story of Mrs. Folake Ademola and Aisha reminds us of the dangers of pride, denial, and indifference. When we choose to ignore the truth and protect our own comforts at the expense of others, the consequences of our inaction can be devastating. No matter how carefully we craft the image of a perfect life, the truth we bury will eventually rise to the surface. Only through compassion, accountability, and courage can we truly prevent the damage caused by our silence. Here comes the end of our story. Thank you for watching. Please, if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so as to be notified when I post another video. See you in my next video. Bye.